Well, it's good to see Coach Hawkins in Saluki Maroon this year. Of course, for me, when I was an undergrad at Ball State, I saw his face a lot on the opposite sideline for the Western Michigan Broncos. Longtime head coach in Kalamazoo. Now, Coach Hawkins, of course, part of Coach Nagy's staff here. Coach, I'm sure that probably feels just like yesterday, right? Not too long ago.
Yeah, in many ways,
Yeah.
although I wouldn't wish seeing my face on anybody. It wasn't all that long ago.
Of course, so many great trips, I'm sure, to Muncie. You know, me being a Ball State alum, there's so much to do in Muncie, Indiana.
There were some good memories, and it's all based on the wins and the losses, obviously.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, and so there's a couple of good memories in there, but Muncie was a tough place to play.
Oh, no doubt. And Kalamazoo was an extremely tough place, too, when you were on the sidelines there for Western Michigan. But let's talk about this transition, the Carbon deal. What was it about getting back with Coach Nagy to be at the Division I level that really intrigued you?
Yeah, it was never about level. I was really comfortable. I spent the last couple of years at Quincy University and in the GLVC, and that's where I started, kind of started my career as a head coach anyway, and in the 90s. And so I spent 9 years there as a head coach before I went to Western Michigan as an assistant, then spent 3 years doing that, and then, of course, 17 years as the head coach there, and was out of it during COVID and kind of doing my own thing, working with ESPN and having some other things on the business side when Quincy called. And I knew then that that coaching was never out of my blood. It just wasn't, and it's I don't feel like it's a job. I don't feel like it's a career. I feel like it's a calling, to be around young people and to try and help them and around a game we all love. And so that gave me the opportunity to do that. And then I got a random call from Coach Nagy, that after he got the job here, and we were actually talking about somebody else. And I had told him that I was talking to somebody else about an assistant spot back at the Division I level, and he said, "Well, why aren't we talking?" And so I said, "Well, then let's talk." And the next thing I knew, I was down here. We had a chance to visit, and I knew this was the right situation. I've known about SIU forever. I know the tradition. I knew this was the right guy in the right situation, and excited to be here.
One of the areas, as you kind of alluded to, my question when I mentioned getting back to the Division I level, you said it wasn't about levels. And you see a lot now, Coach Hawkins, whether it be Division II coaches like one I used to work with in Josh Schertz, who's now at SLU, got an opportunity at Division I level, has really boomed. Those guys are getting more of an opportunity now. Coach Schertz will always talk about how there's not a monopoly on great coaching in Division I. There's great coaches everywhere, at every level. For you, what is it like to navigate all the different parts where you've been, your history of being a coach, and knowing that there are really good coaches no matter the level, whether you put Division I, Division II, Division III, whatever. There's great coaches everywhere.
There really are. I mean, Coach Nagy says it all the time during the recruiting process, when we're sitting down with kids and their families and things along those lines. He'll say, I've always felt like I'm a really good coach when I have really good players, and I'm not a good coach when I don't. And I believe in that wholeheartedly. Now, having said that, one of the things that coaching at lower levels, meaning when I was at the Division II level, you learn to have to do some things on the creative side. And even when I got to Western Michigan, the first team that we had that won the MAC championship in 2004, we had all three of our guards, as well as a guard off the bench press over 300 pounds. We had a power forward that was the MVP of the league that couldn't bench press 185 once, and he was 6'8" and really skilled. And then we had we had a center that was 6'7" and couldn't jump over a Kalamazoo phone book, but he was mean as a snake, and you got to find a way to make all that work. And that's what ends up happening at some of the lower levels, not so much in the MAC or the Valley, but you learn to have to put some pieces together and hide some weaknesses and accentuate some strengths.
Now, there's been a lot of documentation and stories written about your relationship with Coach Wooden. And when you were a young coach, young guy growing up in the state of California, one of your early jobs was to drive Coach Wooden around there's so many conversations I'm sure that you can pinpoint with him, but take me through just how that all started. What was your reaction like when you knew that you'd have the opportunity to really chauffeur Coach John Wooden around?
Surreal, in a word. Full of anxiety. I had gone to Coach Wooden's camps when I was a camper, as a little guy, and had blonde hair parted right down the middle, feathered back. Yeah, that was a long time ago, and so when I had the opportunity when I turned 18, 19, somewhere in there, to actually work Coach Wooden's camps as what they call a counselor. Then after, I think it was towards the end of my second year of working those camps, I was approached about becoming the head counselor, which was really strange because you're basically the assistant director of the camp. But one of the perks was you picked up Coach Wooden in the morning and you took him home every afternoon, and that was a half-hour drive. Depending upon LA traffic, that could be as long as 45 minutes. In the morning, we were always alone because of how early it was. But in the afternoon, you were almost never alone. That was a point in time where Coach would use to if anybody wanted to spend time with them. So it could be a member of the media, it could be another coach, it could be one of his former players. It could be anybody, and Coach would always let me know. All right, he called me Steve. He didn't call me Hawk, but all right, Steve, you're picking up Tom today, and I'd say, okay, Coach, thanks. And I knew because he had already told me that I was there at 3:30. I had to be at this stop sign on California Lutheran's campus, and then I would get there and I would say Tom, and he would say, you must be Steve, and that's all. That's all Coach Wooden would tell us. He wanted us to be able to be cordial with each other. But I didn't know is like one day Tom was Tom Landry, who was the coach of the Cowboys, long time. And, the Dallas Cowboys training camps were actually there at California Lutheran. And so over the years, there were Tom Landry. There was we don't have enough time to get into the times that I took Bill Walton with Coach. That was a lot of fun. Tony Gwynn, Sparky Anderson, they were there in that area on their All-Star break. And so it was a very special time.
Did you know, of course, those names are big, and when you get around those names, you know how special that is. But in the moment, did you realize how special it was to be the guy that is in that opportunity to now have so many stories that you can share just off the top of your head?
I was really fortunate in that I was able to be in the moment, and I did know how special that was because everybody around me wanted that. Everybody's like, well, can I go? I'm like, no, I'm taking this. I was really selfish with my time there. What I didn't know is that, some 30 years later, 35 years later, we're sitting here talking about some of those same stories. I had no idea the stories that it would create. I knew in the moment that I was really, really lucky to be sitting there and listening to Coach talk.
One of the areas that I've always been impressed by whenever anyone has talked about Coach Wooden is how mentally sharp he was even later in his years, and reminds me a lot of just all those great stories you heard about him, whether it was him younger or older. For you, when you were at Western Michigan, you would mention multiple times how you would get a phone call from him or check in with him. He'd tell you, hey, go look at your practice plans. You'll get more individualized. What was it about the advice that he would still give later in life that still stood with you, that you'd get off the phone and be like, wow, that still sticks with me?
Yeah, it's there are several things, but if I had to boil it down to one word, it would be balance. He was such a balanced man, and he believed in balance, and the physical as well as the emotional, the mental. And that's something that I tried to teach my teams through the years, is the importance of balance. He always talked about the head. When it came to physical balance, whether you're a middle linebacker and you're getting ready to make a tackle, it's the same stance as when you're in a defensive stance, and your head has to be directly in between your 2 feet. And he would go into a long soliloquy about how heavy the head is made up of wood and water, two very heavy things, and he would go all the way through that, but he'd also talk about the mental and the emotional part of things. What part of your body controls the rest of your body? It's your head. And if you lose control of your head, you lose control of the rest of it. So he was really, really big on that. And then the other thing that I had based my programs on, I actually have a tattoo of it on my arm, was his definition of success, which is at the top of his very famous pyramid of success. And then his definition of success says success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction, which comes from only knowing you did the best to become the best you're capable of becoming. Now, what in the world did I just say? Success has nothing to do with the scoreboard. Everybody else will say it does, but it has nothing to do with the scoreboard or how much money you make or what kind of car you drive. It has everything to do with being at peace with yourself. And in his view, the only way you could be at peace with yourself is by doing the very best you could possibly do in every situation, with your family, with your friends, with your team. And then he would always follow that up with, after all, what more could you do than your best? But so it was a pretty high standard just to live up to, but at the same time, I'd say those things right there are what really stand out.
I'm sure there's many moments that take you back in time, whether it's reminiscing of those stories, but also probably seeing Drew Steffi in practice. You probably go, man, I remember coaching Matt. What's that like for you now as an assistant of something, 2-3 months ago, didn't even know if it would be a possibility?
Yeah, well, first of all, I try and get rid of the memories of coaching Matt, his dad. He was just in town last week, and we were able to go out to dinner. And no, I mean, it was a special relationship with his dad, with Drew's dad, and his mom, Beth, because they both played. Matt played for me at Quincy University, and his wife now, Beth, played soccer at Quincy University. And so all these years, I've known Drew since he was, born, basically. And then, all these years later, and tried to help him, throughout the course of his career with advice. I was a little bit of a consultant, if that's what you want to call it, when he was going through the recruiting process, a couple of years back. And then here we are, a couple of years later, and then all this unfolds, and I have a chance to coach him. And now it's a matter. Now he gets to see a different side of hockey. To him, I've always been hockey. The fun guy, almost like the crazy uncle. And now I'm screaming at him, in practice every day. He hasn't seen that side of me yet.
What's the biggest difference, Coach Hawkins, of when you've been in Coach Nagy's chair for as long as you've had and those experiences to now come back as an assistant? Where does that make you a better assistant after you've been in that chair for so long and you really know not that he doesn't know what to expect, because he does too, but how does it make you a better coach when you get reshifted and you're back as an assistant?
Yeah, I think that for me personally, it's been a breath of fresh air, because I don't have to do some of the things that he does. I think and that's sort of a backwards way of answering your question, because I am aware of the meetings he has to go to. I am aware of the time demands that are placed on him. When you are the boss, when you are the head coach, you get pulled in so many different directions. The amount of time that you have to spend not coaching basketball is something that the average person doesn't understand. There are so many time demands placed on you. And so having sat in that seat, I understand that. And then, also from an athletic administration standpoint, I've had some conversations with Tim Leonard, and I understand what it's like to be. He has an entire athletic department to run, and so being able to see things from different angles and understand the time demands and then what needs to be done. And then I always call it blind spots. A head coach has blind spots, and you never know what they are. And I talked to my staff about that when I was the head coach. It's like, if I knew what my blind spots were, they wouldn't be blind. I could see them. So as a coach, as an assistant coach, it's our job to try and find out some of those blind spots so that we could cover those. And it could be anything. It could be starting practice a little earlier. It could be something on the recruiting trail. It could be any number of things. And so I think sitting in that seat might help you might help me figure out some of that a little bit more. Certainly understanding of the time demands.
Well, the other side of it too, Coach Hawkins, as you know, when you're in that head chair, to have a great staff around you is what's most important. What have you really enjoyed about getting to know the staff?
I cannot begin to tell you how excited I am about the staff that Coach put together. I mean, I love working with Scott. I've known him for a long time, knew who his dad was. You know, we got to know each other well, unfortunately, before his passing. But then after getting here, excuse me, and seeing the staff and getting to know them and being together really for the last 2 months, and you spend so much time with them. I mean, at one point in time when we were putting together the team that we now have, we had 10 recruits and their families in over a 23 straight day period. And so that's a lot of time to spend with each other, and you're kind of on the fly. I mean, but you take somebody, you know, like everybody has so much worth. I mean, Javon has been here, you know, so he knows the university, he knows the city well. You know, somebody like Tay has been with Coach the whole time, so he's able to help us. Like, okay, what does Coach want in this situation? Will has been in the Valley, you know, already at UIC, and so he brings a wealth of knowledge, and they're all really good basketball coaches. Darian is a tremendous basketball coach, I think a superstar, you know, in the field coming up. He knows players, and he's so good at individual workouts. And then J-Mac, you know, I mean, Justin Inslee I'm going to show my age here when I talk about Radar O'Reilly, you know, from MASH. You know, I said he's Radar, and somebody looked at me like, "Who's Radar?" And he's just like, "Yeah, all right, I got to figure out some other way, you know, to come up with that." But I mean, he holds everything together, so it's just a tremendous staff that complements each other very well. Love working with these guys.
So far from a summer, from a basketball standpoint, you know how important this time is. Everybody does. What's been most encouraging about the time you get? What do you like about the group?
Yeah, I mean, it's I love. I mean, I think our athleticism and our length is something that we can really use to our benefit. I think that one of the things, some people will view it as maybe as a holdback or a weakness of some sort when we talk about our lack of experience or lack of being together. But I kind of view it as a strength, you know, because everybody's on the same page and nobody's earned anything yet. And I don't say that in a negative way. I'm just saying that nobody is coming in with a sense of entitlement. You know, the three kids that we have back, you know, I mean, Moo and obviously, I mean, everybody that has been, I mean, Double S, Jared,
Yeah.
These guys are, even though they've been as part of the program, they're not assuming anything, and they because everybody is doing it for the first time, you know, together, and everybody has a very open learning experience going on. We're all getting used to each other, and you know, it's like, okay, we're all here, we're all in this for the first time, we're all trying to figure it all out, and that brings us together in a very strange way, but it's sort of more organic than it would be if you have guys. Now, I don't want to do it again. You know, I know that, you know, having to put this many guys together. But so far it has been, and I think if you bring in the right kids, you know, if you bring in the right kids, culture means everything. And if we identify the right kind of players that we want to represent SIU, then I think it goes a long ways towards helping everybody out.
Don't want to say it's the hardest part of it all, but look, there's so much tape. And there's so many things that are available to you as a coach now, Coach Hawk, in terms of being able to evaluate a player and if they got the skill sets of what you need. But I think maybe fans do understand it, but describe the time and when you don't have a ton of time in reality to try to get guys on your roster to navigate through, okay, we probably know if this guy's got the skill set we want. Do they have the mentality? Do they have of building a team together of how you need those chemistry pieces to really form?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many layers to that. I mean, first of all, I think, you know, I heard it put this way a long time ago, and I think I find it to be true. When you're putting together a program, not a team, by the way, it's very different, you know, because a team has chemistry. It's temporary. When you're trying to put together a program, which is culture, which is more sustainable, there's a difference between the two, and that's what we're trying to do here. But at the beginning, we had to go heavy into the portal because we were so far behind. And so that's something, again, that we don't really want to do moving forward in a real heavy way. But, I always felt like when you're putting together that program, you're putting together an orchestra. You're not putting together a band. If you get too heavy on the horns, it's going to sound bad. If you get too heavy on the strings, it's going to sound bad. Kind of goes back to Coach Wooden, balance.
Yeah.
Is how you're going to make the song work. And in our case, that song is out on the court. I think that the other thing that comes into play, everybody understanding their role is a huge part of things. It's just, when you're putting together that orchestra, it's really important that from our standpoint, you put the right pieces in place. Final thing I'd say about that is sometimes, kind of like scheduling, sometimes when you put together a roster, it's kind of like the opposite of the jigsaw puzzle. It's a jigsaw puzzle, but it's backwards because the last piece may be the hardest piece. The last couple of pieces may be the hardest pieces to find. Early on, when you need to sign 10 guys, it's what, that guy's a pretty good player. If he's a good dude, all right, and he's going to take care of business academically, and we want him. It doesn't matter whether it's a big guy, a wing, a guard, you're going to need it. And so you can start bringing pieces in at the beginning. But as it gets deeper, it becomes a little more difficult.
Well, there's plenty of more things I can talk to you about. We'll end on this note, Coach Hawkins, of you really mentioned how you understand history, and we talked about your relationships in the past. And one of the things is how Coach Herron really built this program in the 80s and 90s. And you understand that run they had there, of course, in the 2000s with Coach Weber, Coach Painter, Coach Lowry. You understand the history here and the names, but to kind of tie it all together for our fans, you initially was almost close to being part of Coach Herron's staff here.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, actually. I was at Quincy as a graduate assistant in around 1987 or so. And there was an assistant coach on Coach Herron's staff, Robert McCullum, who I ended up working for at Western Michigan. But Robert was here, and I'd been with him at South Alabama. And when an assistant spot opened up here at the time, Robert called me at Quincy, and he said, "Hey, we got a spot here, and I think we could use your help." So I came down, I interviewed with Coach Herron, and we walked around a little bit and everything. And then somebody that's very, very familiar to Saluki fans everywhere, I lost the job to Rodney Watson. He got it. And so after and the job paid $10,000 a year, and I was never so devastated in my life. And so when I got the job, like within a day or two after I took the job here, a couple of months ago now, one of the first calls I got was from Rodney, and he was like, I bet you never wished, or I bet you never been so happy to lose out on that job, that I got, 30 years ago or however long it was. So yeah, there's a long history here, and I've been, I almost ended up here, and then there's a lot of the guys that have been in subsequent. I've known pretty much everybody, from Bruce and Paint and Chris and Brian. I recruited Brian, as a matter of fact, when I was at Western Michigan. And so I've known them for a long time. And there's a long history here of really good people.
Does that, I know this is probably maybe not the right way to phrase it, but as you go about day to day, when you go into the gym, when you guys walk from your locker room, you, of course, can see the halls and see all the success, but you've been around it. Like you said, those guys. Like, how different is it for you of just the juice you feel when you take that floor, when you walk through here, when all of those type of names wore that shirt and got the opportunity to do what you're doing right now?
It's huge. History, tradition. So much of it. Led the Valley in attendance. Obviously had nothing to do with us. We weren't here. Name one of the top 20 student sections in the country. The Dog Pound. Everybody knows about the Dog Pound. Can't wait to meet those guys and ladies and get to experience that. When I was at Western Michigan, we played here, and so I remember I remember them. I remember wanting to get out of here pretty quick. I think we got them at our place, but they got us here anyway. And so even going all the way back, a lot of SIU people would know who John Dunn is, the former vice chancellor here. He was my president at Western Michigan University for a while. And so there's a lot of ties here. And when you walk around the Banterra Center and you see all of the graphics of all of the players and all of the memories here, you can't help but to get excited every single day, of seeing that what I'm now fortunate enough, lucky enough to be a part of. It's just in a really exciting time.
Coach Hawk, it's been exciting to get to know you even better and get to meet you this summer and be in there with you guys as your workouts go along. Appreciate the time today and look forward to summer to come, and also looking forward to that. We'll be tipping off in Banterra Center sooner than we think.
Yeah, let's not rush it. We have a little work to do between now and then, but I appreciate it. Go Dogs.